So for this project, we're going to recreate a toy or another item in wire and then cover it with rice paper. We're going to be using aluminum wire, 17 gauge, which is the thicker wire, and a thinner wire, 22 gauge or 28 gauge steel wire as a binding, as a cold connection uh, process. So you'll pick a toy from my bag of toys, and then you're going to recreate it twice the size, depending on the toy. Um, so I've chose this bone, and you can see I started a wire uh, K wire form for it. I'm going to restart it and show you guys how I did it. So I'm going to take a piece of wire. You can see it's pretty long. And we'll use my needle nose pliers. The needle nose pliers that I'm using have a cutting mechanism right here. It's up close to the handles. So you put your wire in there and give it a snip. And then this wire is not going to be long enough for this, for the first part. You want a pretty good length of wire. I'll use that in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a silhouette of my object to start with, and then I'm going to start adding the different aspects to it, the different forms or the three-dimensionality. So I want it twice as big. So I'm going to use my object, straighten my wire out a little bit here, as a measuring device. So that's how long I'm going to make it. And then I can also use the wire as well here, since I'm making it twice as big, to establish the height of it. You gotta kind of watch your eyes with this one. Don't get poked. So when you're bending wire, if you want a soft curve, you want to use your hands. If you want a harsh curve or a turn, you want to use your pliers. So you can see here that I can create nearly 90 degrees. Wire's not going to go past, not going to have a sharper corner than that. It's just the way the metal is. You'd have to deal with thicker metal and some and some filing and such to get. So at first this is going to be kind of wobbly and wiggly, and try not to get yourself too worked up at first. And I'm just looking for kind of the general silhouette of the bone. And as you make more and more connections, it'll get stronger and stronger. It'll get more stable, and you'll be able to control what's going on a lot better. And then I'm going to connect this wire back to itself by just giving a little twist. And then in the middle of this twist, so I can perhaps use those twists, I'm going to take a piece of the steel wire and wrap around it to make it a nice solid connection. It's not going to feel solid at first. It's going to feel wiggly, and wire's going to be flying everywhere. I'm trying to make this as neat as possible. Sorry, I didn't realize I wasn't working on camera there. So you can see that I'm keeping it relatively tight and neat. That'll make the rest of it go pretty well. So I'm leaving a little bit of this loose so I can use that as the use that to connect my next wire to. So I'm starting to look at this, and now you're going to cut some of the little steel wires here just to have it. So now I'm going to start looking at a secondary form. Now I can use this little shorter one and start working on creating different aspects of the bone, or the whatever toy you choose. I don't have a whole lot of harsh angles in this, so I'm probably not going to be using the pliers to make my bends too much. I'm gonna, as I connect it to this next wire, I'll take my steel and create this cold connection, this wrap. So if you were actually welding or soldering or brazing, different methods of connecting metal to itself, depending on the metal. These cold connections are where you would be doing so. So I'm going to bring this on around and start creating this shape right here. So it comes down, and then curves back. So I'm going to bring it down and take it back to my original wire. Like this. And then where it crosses here, I'm going to create another connection. Trying to keep it neat and kind of tidy. And then since I connected it here, I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, we'll go ahead and bring it on around and bring it into this little hollow here. There it is. to create this little circle here. Go ahead and leave that through there so I can bring this back up here. And create a connection here. So these places, every place I've kind of crossed back over the wire, I'm going to go and add just a little extra support with some of the steel wire. And that'll keep it from sliding up and down the wire as much. This needs a little bit of a squeeze. At your joints, you can give it a little squeeze with the pliers. That'll cinch it down. I'm even going to take a little longer piece here and wrap along this, keeping it neat, tidy. So you can see it's starting to get a little bit more stable. It's going to make it really stable is getting more down there. Do a couple more on this and then I'll go back to kind of finishing this. It's not quite finished yet. So you can see how I'm working and how to kind of finish up the So these ends that I'm leaving, you don't want these poking up. Let's see how that's poking up. You don't want it poking up. You want to kind of wrap them around and kind of leave them pointing in, because if you leave them poking out, you're going to end up poking yourself with it. And that goes for even the little ones on the steel too. Add some more strength here. That's not quite how it needs to look. Like that. We'll connect these two. And wrapping it here. This kind of the tying, the wrapping can be used on many different mediums. You could do it with sticks, vines, or you could do it with wood and yarn or toothpicks, dental floss. Use this method of combining or connecting many different ways. So I'm going to go back down here and look a little closer at what I've done here. I kind of created this part of it. I can get a little bit more detailed, and I've established which side is which with this piece over here. Wire flying everywhere. So I'm only 2 pieces in, so it's not very stable. It's not going to stand up quite right. I'm actually going to start. Wow. I'm going to start the piece I'm bringing down here back here. I'll take a little bit, bend it, wrap it around. This part right here is still kind of floating free, and once I get another part down there, it'll make it work a little better. Making this nice and neat as well would help later. There we go, adding more. Sorry. Oh, bone hit the floor. So bringing this down, coming along this edge right here. Looking at the shape. Sometimes gotta use your body to hold parts of the wire that are running free. And then it comes back here to a relatively thin ridge going along top of the bone. This at this point only has like now 2 connections, so it's really quite moving or floppy. And to solidify it a little bit more. Now to kind of bring this together a little bit more, I'm going to create kind of wrap around like this to give it the form. It's not quite round, it's a little more oblong. Wider on the bottom, a little skinnier on top. Using a piece of the binding wire. So before I continue further, I want to attach this wire to that, the loop I just made. Squeeze to kind of set the wire in place. Grab this loose end and pull it in. Now for the other, I seem to have run out of my binding wire, so wire does something called work hardening, or metal does, not just wire. As you bend it, it gets kind of less bendy, so it gets a little stiffer. So it gets a little bit harder to bend, and that's called work hardening it. And if you bend it too much, it will end up breaking. You can see I was doing this towards the end, and so I'm not using my cutters here. I'm just kind of work hardening it, and it becomes brittle and it will break. After you've done that once or twice, you'll start realizing what's going on, and there are ways you can get rid of the work hardening. However, it takes a torch and heat, so it's called annealing, and that's a different subject for a different day. My cutters were actually having a hard time cutting the small wire, so that's why I was kind of using that bending to finish the cut for me. So now I can got some more stability, I can start working towards poke myself on the little wire. So now I can take this out here and continue up this way. I think I'll make it like so. Now I have another connection here. Since I got close to the end of the wire, I bent it around the other wire. Let's give it a little bit more stability. Now I'm going to bind it with the steel wire to try to keep it somewhat in place. Until it gets attached to something else, it's not going to be, it's still going to move a little bit, which is good and bad. The good part of it is as you start getting further into into building it, you'll be able to manipulate it a little bit and keep it put it where you want it. Make it look like what it's supposed to as you get more into it, which is kind of where I'm at with this piece. So we're going to set that one back since it's on its way. And you can see I've got, a little hard to see on the camera, you can see I've got this shape started here, and I've got this shape here. I'm seeing that this needs to be moved around a little bit. So I can still move it slightly. And now I can start using add more wire to create more structure. And like I said, I'll do a few wires on this. This is one way to do it. It's going to really depend on your subject matter, on kind of you figuring out the best way to go about it. You want to create a neat structure, organized looking. I know this isn't exactly organized looking, but it's an organic form. So it's not quite like it would be if you were doing a Matchbox car, or this is kind of a organic form as well. So it's going to be a little bit more organic in nature. Makes sense. So let's see. Get my model here. I've got this kind of coming around. Probably need to bring one down through here. And kind of bring it into there. And create. So I've got, okay. I think what I want to do, I want to create, I think I'll bring it here. So I want to create, so you want to start with kind of the generals and then start looking more detail at how the form is. So I want to create this line here and bring it down and around here. Actually, I think that just needs a little bit of bending, and then we'll attach there. So make this stable here. I'm going to connect with my baling wire, binding wire. As neat as possible, and keeping the pokey parts preferably clean. Yeah. And I need another one here. So I'm just looking to create the structure. I'm not going to fill it completely in. The paper is going to cover, we're going to cover the entire thing with rice paper. That's going to be a separate video. So since I don't have a whole lot of form coming through here yet, I'm going to bend this out and create that. Because if I were to lay a piece of paper on there right now, it'd be flat. I want it round, so. We'll bring that back in there. Let's see if I'm going with that. Need some more binding. It's easiest to do a bunch of these before each wire you start. Your guys' pliers will probably cut better than mine. These are old and well used. So each time one wire crosses the other, you want to add structure by binding it. Trying to keep the binding as neat as possible. I'm doing a figure 8 here on this kind of this X crossing. Too much wire out here. Too much wire in it. That other piece was sitting on the desk too and creating issues. And I'll bring this down. So I'm like right in here, and I've created this part of the bone here that comes down and in. So I'm going to connect this piece down to there. These pieces are a little bit pieces of binding wire I just pulled off are a little bit on the large side. Would be good for some jobs. I'm not sure, it's probably a little too large for the job I'm working on. And then just like with the drawing, I'm going to continue this line and figure out where it needs to go next. So I'm here, and I want to create a form here, so it comes around. Look at what I've got. Attach it there. Sorry. So as you get further into it, you'll start looking more at the details and how the forms are. This comes up here. I've just a note. I found that working with shorter pieces of wire is actually a lot more frustrating than working with longer pieces of wire. So I wouldn't recommend cutting off, like, I wouldn't recommend doing section by section. Create a longer line. Even though it's a little bit frustrating. Make sure you're keeping track of your reference. Loop that one in. That's the big wire. Now I can go back and bind. You gotta watch poking yourself with these small wires. Don't feel good. I'll use the rest of this to create structure on the bottom here. And still have quite a bit of work to do in here. You can see that it's kind of missing some, but creating structure like I've been doing here through the rest of it is the next step. And then the next video will cover it with rice paper, and I'll demonstrate that.